Welcome to the Mandela Rhodes Foundation podcast, under the auspices of our founding patron, Nelson Mandela's dream to build exceptional leadership capacity in Africa. We invite listeners to journey together with us as they hear intimate, behind-the-scenes stories that helped shape the journeys of remarkable African leaders and people on the rise. The Mandela Rhodes Foundation podcast is a platform for authentic and personal narratives of what it truly takes to rise to leadership with a uniquely African lens across a range of topics. Hello guys, I'm your host Mantombi Makubele, the External Relations Manager at the Mandela Rhodes Foundation. And in this episode, we continue to explore different facets of leadership by addressing a critical and inspiring topic: the significance of healing work for leaders. And I'm so looking forward to this because I am joined today by Tumelo Moreri, a 2014 Mandela Rhodes Scholar from Botswana. She's an advocate for transformative leadership and a host of the podcast, the Tumelo Moreri podcast. Thank you for joining me, Tumelo. Dumela.
Dumela Mantombi. It's such an absolute joy and an honor for me to be joining you on the podcast.
Awesome. And as a way of checking in, how are you coming in today?
I think I'm in a reflective space because, I was deeply engaged in a workshop this afternoon, exploring this very theme that we're going to be conversing around. So, deeply in a reflective space, and possibly also in an energy of gratitude, to have the space to converse on this very specific subject and in the ways that I anticipate we might be going to. So just gratitude for the conversation and for the opportunity to sit together and share on the theme.
Well, I'm coming in feeling good, actually. Pumped up, I think. Because, like you said, we just came off the back of the workshop that we've been having. This is now leading us to your work as a psycho-spiritual healing and womb medicine.
Yeah.
But before we talk about that, I want to just set the context here by informing our listeners that you actually studied actuarial science and mathematical statistics. So what happened in your journey for you to make such a huge transition?
Oh, my word. Yeah, first, thank you for asking that question. Sure, it's been quite a journey, and it was also quite the journey, right? So really, like from a young age, I was very curious about the concept and the potential to discover and experience my purpose, And fortunately, by the time I was doing my second year of the actuarial science degree, I actually believe in that year I had like one of my spiritual awakenings, maybe my first spiritual awakening that year. The second year of my degree, I knew that the actuarial path was not for me. And what emerged for me was just the knowing and the clarity that, while the actuarial path might work for some people, I knew that it wasn't quite it for me, and that I wanted to live a life with meaning, with purpose, and do work that was fulfilling. Those were the three words that emerged for me then. This was like 2011, And that year, I actually wanted to change degrees, and I did think quite a lot about what degree I could switch to. I thought about psychology, but eventually I decided to complete the degree. just to complete it anyway and see what might emerge afterwards, And I must admit that the switch was very gradual and difficult as well.
Okay.
Because for somebody who had performed as I had in high school, there were certain expectations in terms of what I was to study, in terms of who I was to become in society. And so just even coming to terms with that internally for myself, it was a very difficult transition to make, and it took time because I completed the degree in actuarial science. And instead of going to do a social science thing after that, I was like, ooh, let me just switch to mathematical statistics, So it was very, very gradual. And so, it was really coming from this place that I knew I was called for something, I want to say bigger, although this is not in any way to minimize the paths of other people, but I knew I was called to something more than just in enriching myself or, so to speak. I knew there was a bigger calling for me, to serve humanity and to facilitate some positive change in the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned there that for someone of your caliber and the kind of marks that you were getting.
Yes.
Yeah, they expected a certain, pathway.
Yeah.
And you did go that path because you became a Mandela Rhodes Scholar, which is quite prestigious,
Yeah.
You were part of the class of 2014. Can you tell us about that journey? Because becoming a Mandela Rhodes Scholar means that you are an A student.
Yes.
Yes. And, people don't expect A students to be on this path that you are on. So what was the journey like for you, to becoming a Mandela Rhodes Scholar? And were there moments while you were a scholar that stood out for you?
Yeah. Oh, my word. You're taking me all the way back because I applied for the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship in 2013 when I was doing my honors, right? And so, at this time, I already knew that my heart was definitely set on serving the African continent, And at the time, leading to me applying for the scholarship, probably for a year and a half or 2 years before then, I was just in deep reflection about the state of leadership on the African continent, and also really in a state of deep concern and heartbreak, just given the state of leadership on the continent and the state of well-being of our African people. And I was sitting with this big question around what it is that we could possibly do to begin to nurture and to cultivate the leadership that we know we want, to move things in the direction that we desire for our continent. And so by the time I applied for the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship, it really wasn't about furthering my studies. I wanted the leadership development program,
I see.
And for me, it was really the intention was to grow as a young leader, to figure out, my path, my leadership path, and the ways in which I could be of service on the continent, Yeah. And so when I got a call from Sean Johnson at the time, because, oh my word, they would call you and be like, hey, are you able to receive a call right now? Because we have some news. It was an absolute dream come true for me. Yeah. And then in terms of what stood out for me in the experience of the scholarship, oh my word, the leadership development program completely changed my life because, wow. I often say that my healing journey started, and it is true, my healing journey started in that leadership development program, in the very first workshop where we were exploring leadership, for a girl who grew up in Botswana. And I wouldn't say it's really a Botswana thing, but at the time I thought it was. I'm like, oh my God, why have we never been invited to look within ourselves, to interrogate our past experiences, to interrogate our pain. But like that very first workshop allowed me an opportunity to meet myself for the first time in a very, 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 very long time. And it kickstarted my healing journey, which has brought me really to where I am right now, because my healing journey continued after the leadership development program. I went even deeper and further. Yeah. So like that's what really, really stood out for me, that I went in wanting to develop my leadership capacity, and what I got was the beginning of a healing journey that would radically change the course of my life, Yeah. So I never forget that first workshop that we have. I never forget the reconciliation workshop that we did, because it invited us to really reflect on whether we were reconciled as human beings, as much as we wanting to reconcile the world. Were we ourselves reconciled internally within ourselves? So,
being a Mandela Rhodes Scholar,
yeah,
it's such a prestigious thing. What does it feel like, and how did your community treat you? How did your family treat you? Because I'm not a scholar myself, but I always look at you guys and I'm like, I wonder what this thing feels like. It feels like I'm missing something. I didn't drink some juice that everyone has taken. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my. So maybe two things, right? So I applied for the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship while I was studying at the University of the Free State. And so already I was away from home, Botswana, right? And my experience was that the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship was, at the time, I don't know how the experience is now, but it felt like it was something that was more understood here in South Africa than back in Botswana, right? Such that even when I did share that, oh my God, I got the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship, most of the people back at home, they didn't really understand like the gravity of this thing, But here in my South African community, which is where I was based at the time, it's something that my peers like just deeply celebrated for me, because they understood the magnitude, of the scholarship, and also given, like, it was a difficult thing to get. I actually consider myself to have been very fortunate to have got it the first time,
Yeah, because you need 70% marks, and that's not like a once off. It needs to be like consistent. So it
needs to be consistent, and also there are a lot of people who are applying.
Yes.
And so just the selection process itself, like wow, it's such a gift, to have been selected as a scholar, so that's one. Like the second layer of it is that being awarded the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship felt like it came with such a huge responsibility to live up to the legacy of what this represents, So a lot of us, and I know I experienced this myself, after having been awarded the scholarship, there were feelings of feeling unworthy of the award, wondering, am I good enough? Wait, like, are they sure? Which is really where the conversation on healing is taking us, those feelings of imposter syndrome that, oh my God, like Sean is going to call me tomorrow and tell me, hey, we made a mistake,
Really?
Yeah. So, because that's imposter syndrome, like self-doubt, even though, we know Mandela Rhodes scholars are amazing human beings, like out of this world, but as amazing as they are, as we are, they are human. We are human, and given some of the experiences we might have had in our lives, it can lead to, the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, not really seeing your worth and your light, So there was that. And as I mentioned, just the the responsibility that came with being called a Mandela Rhodes Scholar and the desire to live up to what that represents, you know. It's such an honor. I mean, for me, it's been 11 years and I still like it sits in my heart, just the fact of being a Mandela Rhodes Scholar, possibly because of the impact it has had in my life, how it has enriched and developed and poured so much value into my life and inspired me to become a better human being and something that I desire to live up to. Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how such a pivotal experience, you know, can lay a foundation for one to build a meaningful life.
Yeah.
And back then, this work of healing was not popular.
Really?
I feel like now everyone is like a chakra hand.
Yeah,
Everyone is healing. Everyone is
true.
talking trauma. But back then it wasn't. So how did you navigate that tension between wanting to be, you know, you're this Mandela Rhodes Scholar, boss babe, you know, statistics, mathematics, you know, you could have been going up the boardrooms and climbing the corporate ladder.
That's true.
And here you are now, you're a chakra hand.
Wow. I truly am. I forget that sometimes.
So was there a moment where there was this tension that you had to, you know, to deal with, to be like, okay, do I become a boss babe and crush the corporate world, or am I going to be a chakra hand?
So, not quite so much internal tension for me. It might have been tension connected to my external environment, especially family. But internally for me, I would say it was very clear from the get-go what needed to happen. Although obviously, like, there will be challenges along the way, you know? What needed to happen was clear for me because by the time I completed my year in residence, I was already thinking a lot about healing work as a potential pathway for us to begin to nurture and cultivate the leadership we need on the continent, you know? Remember how I said coming into the scholarship, I had this big question of, oh my God, what do we need to do? Like, yeah, I had a big question. And by the end, like 2014, 2015, I was already like starting to write about like healing, wanting to, I don't know, like not that I don't know, because I do. But right after I completed my year in residence, I started working on an idea for a nonprofit organization to run leadership development programs back at home in Botswana. And at the core of that, like if I were to be completely honest with whomever I was sharing the idea with, at the core, it was just an attempt to facilitate healing for people, you know, for future leaders. And so, yeah, that was clear for me that I definitely wanted to be engaged in the work of facilitating healing for leaders so that we can begin to cultivate the leadership we need, you know? However, at the time, I didn't know that I would need to become the healer to facilitate that healing.
Yeah.
I don't know what my thoughts were. I don't know where I was, but I was always singing the song that, oh my God, leaders need to heal. And I honestly didn't know because I only knew about this spiritual calling much later, you know? Yeah. So for me, like, it was a no-brainer. It was like, of course, I think I have found the answer for me in terms of how I can contribute to shifting the experience of leadership on the African continent. And I'm going to do it, you know? I did, however, work for some time. I worked in corporate for like 18 months, but I only stayed that long because I needed to save so that I can go set up my thing and begin to do my work, you know? Yeah.
I
yes.
see. So you didn't, because you went to work to save up money, you probably didn't have a lot of tension with your parents, and people are like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, we were expecting you to be doing this, you're doing that. Did you have meetings? Like, I want to know, where's the tea? Like, Give us the tea.
Okay.
Yeah, where you called into meetings to say you're losing your mind.
Oh my word. So there was definitely a lot of tension with my external environment, because even how I got into corporate in the first place, it was because, I was sitting here with this very beautiful actuarial science degree. So I was back in Botswana at the time. So I'm sitting here with this, and it seems like everybody knew, like everybody knew that, oh my God, this girl has an actuarial science degree. And so they kept sending me like job adverts, telling me to apply for this job and that job. And I only applied for a job out of pressure, because they was just really on my case. And at the time, I actually just needed a moment at home to figure things out. At the time, I didn't really have the language to ask for something like this, to say, hey, guys, I just need a moment to just figure out what direction I want to take. Do you think you could maybe allow me that? All these many years now, I have the language. So, so then I went into the job space for those 18 months. And something that I live by, I like to, like when I'm making decisions that don't affect the well-being of another, I would rather act now without asking for permission and then apologize later. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So where it concerns me and only me and my life path, I have opted to not offer explanations while I'm still figuring it out and acting on it. So I'll act on it, and then maybe later I'll say, hey, this is what I was doing. And so that's really what happened. The only person who knew I was leaving my job was my mother. And then, the rest of the family found out as it was unfolding,
And how did she feel? Was she happy?
This is how she got to know I had no intentions of staying in corporate. I had been in a temporary position for 6 months. And then at the end of those 6 months, I was offered a permanent post in the actuarial department. And at the time, I was already ready to leave, And so there was this huge tension. I was like, oh my God, I was ready to go and experience my freedom. And now these people are offering me this. So I go to my mom, literally in tears. And I'm like, Mom, they offered me a job, but I don't want a job. I want to do so much more with my life, in tears. And so, I don't know, she was probably like, my mom is like in her late 60s now. And I think maybe she was probably like taken aback, maybe worried for me. And so we sat for a conversation where I really tried to paint the picture for her in terms of what I want for my life. And I think maybe in her own way, she understood, because she's my mother. Well, gave birth to me, raised to me. She knows this being that she raised, So I think in her own way, she understood. And the agreement was that I would accept the job offer just so not to hurt the relationships. If people are offering, this was her thing. She was like, people are offering you something, you don't throw it back on their face. I'd rather work for some time, save up, and then when you're feeling ready, that's when you can leave, So she always knew. I would say the big meeting with my nuclear family happened many years later now, when I needed to go for my initiation process as a healer, That's when we had the meeting that, oh, guys, this is actually what's happening. And
Wow. Now, that then takes us to a conversation of leadership and the work that you do and combining the two. Because I think when you had your actuarial science degree, it's easy to be like, okay, guys, these are my papers and whatever. So when you now go into this space of leadership where it's about policies and systems and, all those kind of things, when people want to know what are your credentials in this healing space, what are those? What do you say, to them?
Yeah. So I've been fortunate to have started on this path even before I knew there was a calling to become a healer, right? And so already I was engaged in like psychospiritual education, like signing up for programs, signing up for trainings, and also engaged in quite a lot of research on my own, that equipped me with some of the knowledge that I currently sit with, right? However, I would say the one thing that has felt like very validating for me has been my initiation process as a spiritual healer. Like it was after that training, even though like I had like some level of training in psychospiritual healing, and also having had my own experiences of healing. It was that initiation process and the training in it. It was after that I was like, okay, now I feel like I can truly do this and believe that I have the skill and the know-how to hold space for people. Although it's a never-ending journey of learning, Like I've accepted that I will always be learning. I will always be doing some form of training, And I've also just made a conscious choice that I will work with organizations that feel aligned, that feel like this is the work that they're looking for. This is the person that they're looking for, That's felt like that level of alignment has felt like very important for me, such that I'm exactly what they're looking for, and the work that I offer is exactly what they're looking for.
So the significance of healed leaders. What do you mean when you say someone is a healed leader?
Yeah.
Like, can you explain to us, like, what's that concept of a healed leader?
Maybe first it just deserves mentioning and highlighting that the journey of healing is probably a lifelong one, and that we are probably never completely healed, It's a journey that we commit to for however long in our lives, not necessarily with the intention to be completely healed and free of all pain and trauma, And so if we were to stay with that phrase of a healed leader, actually I would want to say like a healing leader, So a healer who's actively engaged in their healing journey, and continuously making the commitment and the investments to heal in the ways that they might need to heal, given what might be emerging or the experiences that they have had. So a healed leader or a healing leader would be somebody who really is committed to their healing journey, to attending to the pain, the trauma, the conditioning that they might have sustained in their lives, with the appreciation that, even as we are leaders, we are also human, and we are not exempt from like the pain, the trauma, the conditioning that is sustained by humans living on this planet. So
this word healing, it's a new thing.
You keep
you know what I
saying.
Yes, because people associate healing with someone who is ill, like physically ill.
Yeah.
So you look at Barack Obama, he's a leader that most people admire. And leaders are where they are because they're excellent. They are good at what they do.
Definitely.
Yes, so now this person is on top of their game. He's a president of a country. Now you say he must heal. What do you mean? What are the practical things that this person needs to do?
Yeah. So the reason why, like, I extended this invitation for us to, I don't know if to call it, if to name it like just an acknowledgement, acknowledging and just returning home and sitting within the awareness that we are human, you know? There's often the idea that like leaders are some super human beings who are untouchable, who are perfect, who are, who cannot even be touched by the happenings of the world, right? But that couldn't be any further from the truth, you know? Because like we are human. And like I said, even in our leadership, we have personal lives and we have experiences, all that we go through, just like any other human being, you know? And some of those experiences might leave us with some degree of pain, you know, that there would definitely be an invitation to, if we're willing and if it feels aligned for us to invest some time and energy attending to whatever degree of pain that we're sitting with, right? And just to speak to what you said about how we tend to associate healing maybe with like physical ailment, right?
Yeah.
I think especially now, like with healing being such a buzzword, there's definitely the invitation to come into an expanded like understanding of who we truly are as human beings, right? That we are so much more than just our body. And I'm also aware that there is a whole buzz about mental health and, you know, and so there's also an invitation to also come into an expanded understanding that there's so much more to our well-being than the well-being just of our bodies and our minds, because we are mind, body, and spirit. And so we are mind, body, spirit, and we also have an emotional body, right? That will be impacted by our experiences. So while I might be that gentleman, might be, you know, trailblazing, he's a president, he also, while his mind might be as sharp as it is, you know, there's also a part where we might want to consider the well-being and the health of his emotional body, the well-being and the condition of his spirit, of his soul. And of course, we're sharing all of this as an invitation, you know, and also with the awareness that we have different belief systems and all of that, you know. But for somebody for whom it's aligned, there's really that invitation to consider that I'm more than my body, I'm more than my mind. And also to come into the understanding that whatever experiences we have in our lives, they have the potential to affect or to impact all these levels of our being. Like they can have an impact at the physical level, at the emotional level, at the level of our minds psychologically, and at the level of our spirit, of our soul, you know? And so when we speak about healing and healing pain and trauma, for me as a psychospiritual healing practitioner, you know, like it's also coming from that lens of like a very holistic healing experience, you know, that considers how our experiences might have affected us at the physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual level, you know? Yeah, how's that landing? I hope it answers the question.
It is, but there's still a gap for me. Practically, what does this healing look like? Is it a person going to therapy? Is it a person looking for a traditional healer or a sangoma?
Yes.
What does it look like? What must this person do who is a leader and they're like, okay, I think I need healing. You know, so what's the first step? What must they do?
Oh my word. Okay. I was actually like deeply reflecting on this in days leading to today. So one, I think, it deserves acknowledging that healing is quite broad, you know? So I think for me, initially when I came across the concept of, oh my God, healing for leaders, it was great. I mean, that I started at that level. But that in itself, like it's very broad because like the scope of healing work is huge, right? And so practically, for somebody who feels called or drawn to healing work, like the first step would be to just get a sense of what aspect of their life they want to attend to, right? And maybe sometimes on their own, without the input of an expert, they might not be able to identify exactly what it is that they need to work on, right? And so then that would require the support of an expert, of a practitioner, to like do a consultation process and to say, hey, this is what I see emerging, So for me, many years ago, like I did after the Mandela Rhodes experience, I was in therapy for 9 months. And I had gone there because I realized I had daddy issues. And in healing work, we call that father wound healing, So I went there because I was like, oh my God, I think I have issues around my dad. And when I got into therapy, it emerged that, hey, even bigger is the mommy issues. And so we spent a huge bulk of the time doing work around the mother wound and inner child work, And so for me, fortunately, I had almost like an impulse of, oh, I think this is the work that I need to do. So maybe for the person who wants to like start engaging in that healing work, we could start there, that just reflecting on what form of healing or what aspect of your life do you possibly feel inspired or moved to work on, right? And then the next step would be to engage an expert or rather like a practitioner who feels aligned for you, right? It could be a therapist. It could be a coach, like a life coach, right? If you want to work on your money, it could be a money coach, right? It could be an indigenous healer, a traditional healer, If you're feeling drawn to that, if you're feeling to like the elemental medicine of traditional healers, working with water, working with herbs, right? Yeah, so it could almost be that step by step. First, reflect, what work do I want to do? Engage a practitioner for them to do an even deeper consultation, because you might have an idea, and when you get into a consultation session, there might be more that emerges, as an invitation of the work that you could engage in. And then, following that consultation, then you could decide with your supporting practitioner, what protocols or what healing work to do, So healing work can be as like therapy is healing work, because therapy is psychological healing, right? We're often working on our beliefs, on the stories that we have formed about ourselves. An example could be on how the experiences we had in our childhood impact how we're showing up in our lives right now, which is the work that I did with my therapist all those years ago, Sometimes healing can just be in the form of having like skilled space held for you.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially having somebody who's skilled in space holding to just hold space for you so that you process and it makes sense of your lived experiences and where you're at, That too can be a healing experience. So that definitely degrees of healing work, Yeah, the other like super, there are different modalities of healing work, and so, my thought is, just go with what feels alive for you and what feels aligned.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that explanation. But I still want to know, as a leader, I'm busy leading. I think I'm fine. What are the signs? What are the things that a leader will start doing that will at least indicate, maybe not to him or to other people, to nudge him to say, hey, this behavior, we think you need to heal? Or if a person is self-aware, they'll be able to pick up to say, oh, I'm showing up in ways that, so what are those manifestations, for people who are listening and are leaders to know, to be like, oh, if I'm doing this, it means, I've got underlying issues that need to be checked.
Even that too is quite broad, but we could definitely work with some examples, because I would say there would be as many presenting problems as we have as there are leaders, So a healing work that I often recommend for leaders especially, and this doesn't mean other human beings can't engage in it, but as a basic, and we'll get to how this might present, in one's life in leadership. As a basic, we want to do our inner child work, and our inner child work is connected to healing our childhood wounds, right? And this is often connected to our relationships with our primary caregivers. Often it's our mothers and our fathers, right? And the technical term for that, it's like mother wound healing work and father wound healing work, And inner child especially because, so if we were to consider the lived experience of a leader, right? Leadership often doesn't start when, like for most leaders at least, it doesn't only start once they're adults. Usually it would be something that started when they were already much younger, And we could even add to that the layer of being a brilliant student, who's sometimes independent, who's already in a leadership position at school, all right? So it could happen, just as an example, right, that for somebody who grew up being independent and trusted with so much responsibility, depending on what happened in the home, because, they they could have been some level of like feeling neglected or abandoned, or of having missed their childhood, because of like the level of responsibility that came too early for them, just given their nature, who they are in their community and their society, right? And so like these childhood wounds can then manifest later in life, in how we show up in our leadership and even in how we experience our leadership, right? You might remember how at the beginning of our conversation, I spoke about like the imposter syndrome that some of us felt when we were awarded the Mandela Rhodes Scholarship, not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, Some of that really comes from, or rather, part of that comes from these earlier experiences that we might have had in our childhood, of maybe having not been celebrated enough. And so you're constantly trying to prove, like, show mom, like, look at me getting all the degrees. Not saying this is everyone's experience, but it can manifest in that, like just quite simply, like, the imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud, feeling not worthy, feeling not good enough. They can also be patterns of like people pleasing, not being able to really hold like firm boundaries, either at work or in personal relationships, and also just given how we might have been socialized into the realm of intimacy, of intimate relationships, I know that it's not every leader, but there are some leaders who struggle with intimacy. And for various reasons, we might have bought into the idea that, oh my God, let me get all my straight A's first before I engage in intimate relationships. Sometimes there can even be the tension of, like for purpose-driven leaders, there can be the tension of around whether we can have both. Can I pursue both my purpose? Can I pursue both like transformative or conscious leadership and also enjoy a healthy relationship, a healthy and fulfilling relationship? for some people, there can be that tension, right? Yeah, another one, because I experienced this. Sometimes, the tell signs can be there without you even being aware it's there, specifically for women. The manner in which, or rather, for most of us, the leadership that we are socialized into, it's a leadership that might teach us to, I want to say, to neglect our bodies and to neglect our femininity.
Come for us, please. Just come for us properly. I can see you are trying to be so politically
I'm trying
correct.
to be so kind.
Just, come for us. Talk to us.
Like for most of us, the manner in which we show up in our leadership is in ways that I think we're probably not even aware, but neglecting of our bodies and neglecting of our wombs, and not even being aware that the ways in which we, like, of grinding 24/7, like 31 days a month, 365 days a year, like team no sleep.
Get the bag, girl.
Get the bag at all costs. It can be quite painful for our bodies and for our wombs, right? In ways that when we are not educated in it, we might not be aware, because even when we do speak of the fact of a woman's body having its own inner seasons, right? A lot of us are not aware of that, and therefore we're not even aware of how to honor our cyclical nature as women, to work with our inner rhythms, to honor the inner rhythms of our bodies, the inner rhythms of our wombs, to honor that at one particular time of the month, we might need more rest than at another particular time, to lean into slowness, into rest when that's needed, primarily because for most of us, like, that's not something that we were socialized into. That was never a conversation. Like, when we got into leadership, there was the idea that, you are literally gonna be like a man, and this is not from a place of lacking love from our brothers, but for a lot of us women, for a lot of us as women leaders, especially in corporate spaces, even in non-governmental, like in NGO spaces, the conditioning has been to, and I guess it's because there's no education on how to be a woman. Yes. And even for men would say there is no education on how to be a man. However, for us as women, like, brought up in this patriarchal society, the socialization there is to try to be a man. It's like, and there's so many ways in which that manifests. Like, we try to silence the menstrual period, even like some of what there's a controversial discussion around,
I want to ask you now, because what you're asking for here is vulnerability. You're asking these women to step into a space where they've always been masculine, because we feel we need to be masculine in this world because the corporate world was designed for masculine men. So for you to succeed in this industry, and you've had to walk around with this armor and being tough, now you're saying, okay, put down that being tough, lay down your strong front as women, healing of their wombs and honoring their cycles. How do they do that in a world that is designed for the grind? Because if you don't show up for those 7 days that you are on your period, someone can take your position. So where's the balance there, and how then do you help women? Because this is part of the work that you do. I saw on your website that you do this work. So how do you help women, especially leaders, to say the grind is not healthy for you? Honor the feminine energy in you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's definitely a gradual process, hey? Definitely not like in something to be manifested or realized overnight, you know? Some of my teachers in this space like to talk about like the 1% shift, you know, to think about, with the awareness of all that I need. Like if, say, maybe the ideal would be that I go on menstrual leave for all the 7 days of my period. If that's what would be the ideal, then to just consider what would be the 1% of all that I need, you know? And to allow yourself that. For me, when like during the days when I was in corporate, concepts of menstrual leave are very far from the space I was in. So what I would do, I would nap during my lunch break. Yeah, I would like sleep on the floor and nap and allow my body to have the rest that it needed. That was the 1% shift, you know? And there are other ways in which we can still honor the body and the cycles of the womb, even while we are in a non-cyclical space, you know? There are ways in which we can care for ourselves in alignment with the inner season we are in, you know? I feel it's unfair that we're talking about this and we haven't told the beautiful people what we even mean by inner seasons.
Yes, yeah, like I'm also a bit lost. I was like, okay, that was coming.
Yeah. So yeah, quite briefly, a woman's body has inner seasons quite similar to the seasons of the year, all right?
Okay.
Yeah, so there's an inner spring, an inner summer, an inner winter, and inner autumn. So inner winter is our menstrual bleed, so our what we call our menstrual period. And it has that energy of being inward, of wanting to go slow for most people, right? And then inner autumn is what we commonly know as PMS, you know? It's the premenstrual, right? Yeah. So it's the days leading to the menstrual period. And then inner spring is the days after the menstrual period, you know, where when you're living in alignment with your season, you can almost feel an emergence of new life, you know, a burst of new energy, right? And inner summer is where ovulation is. So I think in school, we're mostly taught about the menstrual period and ovulation without, you know, and I guess because they don't know, most people aren't aware of what we're sharing now, you know? So there's usually that the lack of education around it being a cycle with multiple seasons, you know? So there are very specific self-care practices that we can lean into that align with each season, that even for someone in corporate, you know, they can work with. Like, say, for example, for me, when I'm in my inner autumn, days leading to my menstrual period, I know I need to lean into slower movement, right? It doesn't mean I'm going to stop working, but even if I had to travel and be in a deeply engaging program, I would need to find like almost space within me to be hectically engaged externally while moving slowly internally, you know, and just allowing my body to move at her own pace, you know. So there are definitely ways in which we can still work with it, even while we are in a non-cyclical space, because there is that reality of, for most of us, almost everyone, we need to put food on the table. There are like just financial needs, you know, and responsibilities that we have. Even beyond financial needs, there might be responsibilities around caring for family, caring for children, you know, caring for our parents. So how do we show up in those roles? Part of that is, let's start with the 1% shift.
Okay.
And take it from there.
Okay. And do you work with men?
Yes, I do.
Okay, because I'm just like thinking about the men leaders who hear all this healing work, but we're talking about wombs. They don't have wombs. Do they have cycles? Do men have all these cycles?
So I don't know yet about the cycles of men. I've been studying more the cycles of women.
Okay.
However, my suspicion is there might be, you know? However, when we speak about men not having wombs and right? I want to highlight that. So we are all creators as men, women, non-binary beings, right? We're all creators and we all have a creation center, all right? So for women who have wombs, that creation center is held within our womb space, right? And even for women who don't have wombs, like we still have that energetic space that is our creation center, right? As a chakra hand, the sacral chakra,
yes,
that's the creation center, such that even if you were to not have your womb, the energetic center is still there. It's there for men as well, Men are also creator beings, they have like the seeds of life. And so that is where that creation center is held. And so when we're speaking about like womb medicine work, it's really a work of the sacral, right?
Okay.
And we know the sacral speaks to like definitely the health and well-being of the womb. It speaks to matters of intimacy, of our emotions, of sensuality, of our creativity, So even though the men I've had the privilege of working with might not necessarily be coming with womb issues, often the desire has been to work around some of these areas, in their lives.
Okay, I get you. So to cycle back now to the significance of this work for leaders.
Yeah.
So a person who has done this work, is it the assumption that, okay, if a leader has done this work, then they are creating or they becoming like a channel? So if you're a CEO who has done this work, will this then mean that it's going to translate into your organization where there is an awareness or we talk about, trauma-informed organizations or trauma-sensitive organizations. Is this where this hypothesis that, if we have leaders who are healed, the world will be a better place or a much safer place? Is this where you were going with when you came up with this concept of the significance of healed leaders? Because I'm just imagining that, okay, this person is healed now. So if it's a female leader, they know their cycles and all that. Do you think then that will translate to policies? Maybe, to be like, okay, all our ladies, we can't give you 7 days, but we can give you a day or two to work from home, things like that.
Definitely. Oh my God. Like, yes to all of what you have said, right? Part of it for me, like at the beginning, at inception, when I started this work, was just the recognition of like the potential of healing work to transform us at a deep level, right? Yeah. Some would say at a cellular level, at a DNA level, like healing work is deeply transformative, enough to change the very fabric of who we are and the fabric of our lives, And if we're truly wanting to transform the world, truly wanting to transform the world, part of the work is in transforming ourselves in the ways in which we want to transform the world. Like, it is my belief that the world is not going to change with us not changing, because we're the unit building blocks of that world. Like, as leaders, we engage in crafting policies, in creating and building organizations, right? So the elements that inform how we create policies and how we create and build organizations, that is informed by who we are now, by the beliefs that we're sitting with, by the stories that we have formed about who we are, about the world. It's largely informed by our conditioning, and our socialization, right? And so really, if we're wanting to birth something new, which is what changing the world requires, like we're wanting to birth something new, for me, it has felt necessary that we're also engaging in a process that enables us to almost birth ourselves anew, to rewire our inner software such that whatever we create is coming from like a new source point that is not embedded with the frequency or the energy of our past conditioning, of our past pain or past trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Of really just unhealthy or pained ways of being, you know? Yeah. So that was one. The other layer of it was inspired by or motivated by an appreciation of the history that we have on our African continent, right? So we have a history of slavery, of colonialism, and in South Africa of apartheid, right? And of war in many of our countries. And these are deeply traumatic experiences that have such a huge and tragic impact on the very fabric of our soul, of our being, right? Part of my reason for coming into this work was informed by that, by what I'm seeing on our African continent. You know, when you look at most of our leaders who, some of them were in the liberation struggle. To be in exile, I believe there is some layer of trauma in that, you know, of being chased, of being displaced, of being hunted, you know, of being tortured, you know. When we look at some of our leaders who do some very bizarre things, you know, who steal from the very people that they were supposed to liberate. For me, some of that behavior, I believe, is flowing from that past of so much pain and of trauma, which often goes like that is never acknowledged, you know, because these leaders often came back from exile and then they had to step into public office, figure out the governance aspect of moving our countries forward. And so the desire for me was that for we who have access to this knowledge, you know, we can begin to do our healing work so that we can shift the experience of leadership on our African continent. And this is with the appreciation that trauma gets, what's transferred. The word? It gets transferred like through generations, you know? So we ourselves as the current generation, we might not have been involved in the liberation struggles, but the fact of our forefathers and our foremothers having, you know, experienced that pain and that trauma, it lives somewhere in our own ancestral memory. It lives somewhere in us, you know? Yeah. I've actually recently been seeing the manifestation of it in some of our leadership networks, you know, which is really concerning. Like networks of young African leaders where you start to see the manifestation of the traits that we say we don't like or that we don't want in older generations of leaders. And so, this has been deeply concerning for me. And I was just like, hey, something needs to happen. We really need to heal if we want to shift the experience of leadership on our African continent. Yeah. And I mean, womb healing work is just one example of the healing work that we can do. Like we said, you know, the scope of healing work is quite vast.
Tumelo.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
People can find me I'm mostly active, although I've been away for some time. I'm mostly active on Instagram. My handle is at Tumelo Moreri. Yeah, they can also check out my website, tumelomoreri.com. Yeah, and I also have a podcast. You did mention that at the beginning. It's the Tumelo Moreri podcast. Yeah. If you might, I did create a body of work on healing for leaders. Yeah. So for somebody who might want to immerse themselves even deeper in this, you can definitely check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mantombi.
Thank you for listening to the Mandela Rhodes Foundation podcast. To learn more about the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, visit our website at www.mandelarhodes.org. Follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram for more updates. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your platform of choice to be notified of new episodes. This is a Volume Podcasts production.